Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pete CD Vinyl World. Today, I wanted to do a ranking of Ace Frehley's solo albums slash Frehley's Comet. Since I just did a review of Origins Volume 2. Um, not a easy catalog to rank, actually, even though he only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 solo studio releases. The reason why it's so tough is they're all of them are actually pretty good. Not a really a stinker in the bunch, and all I like them all for different reasons. And listening to some of these, I had a idea in my mind what was going to be the ranking, but as I listened to them again in the last few days, I changed a lot of them actually. We're going to start from worst and go to best. Saying worst is kind of not proper for this ranking, I don't think, because like I said, I don't think he has a bad album in his catalog. But let's start it off. So I'm going to rank his newest release, Origins Volume 2, as the lowest here. Again, not because it's bad, just because, about half of this is just okay as far as the cover selection. This is a double 45 album. The first side, Good Times, Bad Times, Never in My Life, Space Trunket, is awesome. Good Times, Bad Times, Never in My Life, especially. And then the other ones are just somewhat okay. Jumpin' Jack Flash with Lita Ford's pretty good. 30 Days in the Hole with Robin Zander's pretty good. Kicks is pretty good. He does a cover of She on here from Kiss, which I wish he had done like he did on Origins Volume 1, where he did Rock and Roll Hell, which is a song he didn't really even play on originally, which was from Creatures of the Night. It would have been cool if he did a cover of another Kiss song that maybe he wasn't involved in, instead of She, which is a song he's played live for on and off for years, about 25 years. So, again, great album overall. Production wise, it's not that great. It definitely has that home studio sound to it, very flat sounding. I even sense that he may have used like some auto tune on his vocals. I saw him live last year, 2019, and you could tell now that he's getting older, especially even from 5 years ago, which is the last time I saw him live previously, that he's sort of declining vocally, and I think he's losing his hearing as well. So that's starting to show up on his studio releases. But again, definitely a good album. Just I'm ranking it lowest now, probably even because I don't have the familiarity than some of the other albums. Next up, I'm going with Space Invader, his 2014 release. So this was the second album he had released from coming back from sort of a 20-year gap of not releasing albums. Anomaly came out in 2009. So this is a pretty good album overall. The first two tracks, Space Invader and Give Me a Feeling, are really awesome songs. Again, when listening to this, I like it a lot better than I remember even at the time. It gets kind of with some of the songs here. Immortal Pleasures, Into the Vortex, Cross the Milky Way. What Every Girl Wants is pretty good. One of the songs that I think people don't talk about, it's really good, is Reckless on here. He does a cover of The Joker. It's okay, kind of predictable. And he has a instrumental. All of his albums have an instrumental. This has a song called Starship, which is sort of a mellow, almost acoustic-based instrumental, which Anomaly had the fourth installment of the Fractured series, and that was more acoustic-based too, but that was actually had some solos. This is just like okay. Production's really good, considering the time period we're in here. Matt Starr plays drums on this, as he does on his last few releases. Pretty good production overall. Sounds really good. Again, great album. I love the cover. To me, that's like if Ace had done a solo album, like when he left Kiss in the early '80s. That's would have looked like. Could still see the outline of his costume, sort of. So. Next up is an album that probably most people would rank as his worst, but I like it a lot. It's Second Sighting from Frehley's Comet. So this album is known as the quote-unquote Todd Howarth solo album. So this is their second album together. Todd Howarth was the other singer and songwriter that Ace teamed with when he formed Frehley's Comet. So he has half the vocals on the two albums they did. And he sort of has the higher range. He plays the sort of the Paul Stanley role in the band. And so what happened with this album is Ace sort of kind of fell off the wagon big time and wasn't very involved in the songwriting. He does have a few songs on here. Insane. Dancing with Danger is a cover, actually. I think it's Street Heart is the name, the Canadian band. Juvenile Delinquent's pretty good. But basically the whole second side is almost all Todd. There's a instrumental, The Acorn is Spinning, is just pretty cool instrumental. But I actually think the Todd songs are really strong on here. And if this was like another band, like if they had another band name, I think this would have been like a big hit, this album. The song It's Over Now is a ballad. That was supposedly given to Cheap Trick as an option for Lap of Luxury. They went with The Flame instead. But the Cheap Trick connection is Todd Howarth actually played keyboards for Cheap Trick on the road from the mid 80s through even the early 2000s, I believe. I know when I used to see Cheap Trick all the time in the 90s, he was playing keyboards for them. So that's the connection with them. But overall, this is a really good album. I think that John Regan, the bass player, was instrumental in getting this together and completing it. By this time, Anton Fig had left the band to join, I believe, David Letterman full time as the drummer. And so this had Jamie Aldaker, who played with Eric Clapton. And, he does a great job on here live. I just don't think he has the feel for the older Kiss songs if you listen to some of his live releases, which I'll go over later. But overall, it's a pretty good album, I think. Next up, I'm going to go with an Anomaly. So this was the album he recorded after a big break from Trouble Walkin', and that came out, I believe, 1989 or 90. So we're talking about a 19-year gap in release. And starts off great. Foxy and Free and Outer Space from this, two really strong songs. The cover of Fox on the Run is really good. Surprisingly, he does layer the vocals. Doesn't get up there in high pitch, but he does a good job with it. Genghis Khan's kind of an odd instrumental. In fact, there's 3 instrumentals on this album, which reason I knock it down. The other one is Space Bear, which is just like and Fractured Quantum, which is the 4th version of the Fractured series, and that's pretty good. Change the World, A Little Below the Angels, kind of going over his alcoholism, which he just had gotten sober at the time of this album release. The song Sisters on here, which dates back to the 90s. I actually saw him play Sister live on the 1995 Bad Boys tour that he did with Peter Criss. So that song dates back. Finally good to get a studio version of that. Like I said, Fractured Quantum is a mellower fractured instrumental. It's pretty good. I think the production is pretty good. I would say overall this is probably Ace's heaviest album, even though he does have some acoustic songs on here. The rest of the album is really heavy production-wise. Does have Anton Fig back on drums, which is good. Yeah, pretty good album here. I was surprised because in my mind, before I listened to a lot of these again, I was going to rank this the lowest. But it turns out that it's surprisingly a really good album. Next up is his 2018 release, Spaceman. I was going to rank this a lot higher until I listened to it again. There's some really strong tracks on here. It's a short album, about a half hour, 10 tracks. Rockin' with the Boys, Bronx Boy are really good tracks. He does a cover of I Want to Go Back from Eddie Money, which is perfect for Ace. I think he, in a way, I would say it's better than the original. I like the Eddie Money version too. Ace always does covers on his albums. I call him the king of the covers, just like Joan Jett's the queen of the covers. And he always seems to pick the perfect cover for himself. Couple of songs, Without You I'm Nothing and Your Wish Is My Command, I believe were co-written by Gene Simmons. They're okay. Pretty predictable. Sounds like something that Ace would do if he was still with Kiss, even kind of like the Psycho Circus era. Then you have another couple like Pursuit of Rock and Roll and Off My Back, where they're just okay. Overall, not the strongest album. But as an enjoyable album overall, it's short enough and enjoyable that it doesn't leave you it doesn't make you skip any songs. Like that's the thing about Anomaly, that's like an hour-long album and it's got a couple tracks you might skip over or skip to the next one, but again, it's a pretty good release here. Next up, I'm going with the first volume of Origins. Volume 1. This was a pretty strong covers album. White Room, Street Fighting Man, Spanish Castle Magic, Fire and Water, which has Paul Stanley singing on it, and Emerald, which is great. You know, Fire and Water, to me, I would say is better than anything Ace or Kiss released in the last 20 years, counting not Psycho Circus, Monster and Sonic Boom. You know, Modern Day Delilah was a pretty strong track from Kiss. So I would say those two are the strongest tracks they've released in the last 20 years. Couple of like, Wild Thing is okay. He does a reworked version of Parasite and Colgin, which is, I don't know why he did that. I could see him doing Parasite because a lot of people maybe not realize that he wrote Parasite, so he does that. But Colgin, you know, he's sung that. He's always played that live. It's kind of like, why bother? The cool thing he does is a cover of Rock and Roll Hell, which I mentioned before, which is off Creatures of the Night. Even though Ace was technically in the band then, he didn't play on Creatures. Supposedly what happened is he was listening to that and somebody mentioned like, hey, you should do a cover of that, which Rock and Roll Hell actually is a cover of a BTO song. A lot of people don't know that either. I think Gene just changed some lyrics and added his name to the songwriting credits. And he does Till the End of the Day, which is a Kinks cover. Really good job. Emerald is a really strong track. He does he trades solos back and forth with Slash, which is really cool. So I'll talk about this now. All of these releases, pretty much, and Matt Starr plays drums on this as well as this. This is Scott Coogan on drums, who does a pretty good job. He was with his touring band for a while. He does a great Paul Stanley as well. But what I was going to say about all of these, all of the releases he's released since 2009, is the thing I don't like about them is he plays all the rhythm guitars, so you know that it just has like a I don't know what the sound is, maybe a flat sound. There's no contrast between him and another guitar player, except when he has like a guest soloist. But the rhythm guitars are all Ace, all Les Pauls through a Marshall, so you know it's him, but it's not doubled in a way like he did on his earlier solo album from 78, where he contrasted it with different types of guitars like Strats and Tellys. So that's the one complaint I could say about the newer albums. The latest two, this one and Origins Volume 2, the production is not great. Definitely have that home studio feel. This one, the production is pretty good, I have to say. This one's got Matt Starr on, not Matt Starr. It does have him on a couple tracks. It's Scott Coogan on most of it. And Scott Coogan actually sings Bring It On Home, which is pretty good vocal performance. So definitely, I'm not big when bands do cover albums, but this one was actually pretty good. And so was the latest one. So we're getting into the top three now. And for number 3, I'm going with the debut from Frehley's Comet here. Again, this one has Todd Howarth on vocals and co-wrote half the songs at least. Anton Fig on drums from the 78 solo album. And it's produced by Eddie Kramer. So it definitely has a connection sound-wise, I think, to that 78 album. Some great songs on here. Rock Soldiers, which is written by, co-written by Chip Rock, I believe, who, Chip Taylor, I'm sorry, Chip Taylor, who wrote Wild Thing. Breakout, which goes back, if you're a Kiss fan, on the Revenge album, the song Car Jam, the music was originally written for The Elder, but they wrote some lyrics with Richie Scarlett and came up with Breakout. Into the Night by Russ Ballard, that is a cover, and it actually, he was the guy who wrote New York Groove. Some of the other songs, like We Got Your Rock and Love Me Right, are just okay. They revamp a song from 707, Todd Howarth's old band, called Calling to You, which was, if you ever saw an early 80s movie called Megaforce, that was the title track to that. So 707 was a band that Todd Howarth was in that was on Casablanca Records in the early 80s. So there's another connection. And they redid that song and renamed it Calling to You. But Ace wanted to do it because this was on the newly formed Megaforce Records. And so he's like, I like that song Megaforce. So they reworked it and called it Calling to You. Pretty good song. Stranger in a Strange Land, okay. And Fractured 2, which is sort of the sequel to Fractured Mirror from the 78 solo album. This one is the most similar to that instrumental. But overall, this is a very enjoyable album. I remember getting this on cassette when it first came out. I had not heard that Ace was doing a new album or anything, and I just happened to be in the record store when this came out, and I was like, damn, it's Ace Frehley. So I picked it up right away. Pretty successful. The album almost went gold. Supposedly, the record company didn't want it to go gold because they had some clause in their contract where they'd get a better percentage rate if the album went gold of the sales. So they sort of suppressed the album, but they all think it actually sold 500,000 copies. But Ace was supposedly pretty cleaned up at the time, so he did a pretty good job on here. So my number 2, I'm going with Trouble Walking. So this album, by this time, Todd Howarth had left the band, and he got Richie Scarlett on second guitar and some vocals. Now, Richie was in the original version of Frehley's Comet, which never recorded an album, so he's back in the band. And produced by Eddie Kramer, Anton Figs on drums. This album is a pretty kick-ass album from start to finish. Shot Full of Rock, Do Ya, which is a cover of the Move and ELO song, and I actually like his version better. 5-Card Stud, Hide Your Heart. Yes, that's the same Hide Your Heart that came out on Hot in the Shade from Kiss the same year. So what happened was, supposedly, they weren't aware that Kiss was doing it. Kiss had demoed this for Crazy Nights. It should have been on that album, I think, their version. But some other people, like Molly Hatchet and Bonnie Tyler, actually had recorded a version of it with John Regan on bass, who's Ace's bass player. So John is actually the one who recommended Ace do it. Wasn't aware that Kiss was putting it on Hot in the Shade at the same time. So I think Gene found out about it at the time and actually called Ace and asked him to take it off the album, but he didn't. So both of their versions basically came out at the same time. He does an okay version of it. Song Trouble Walking, it's got Peter Criss on drums and background vocals. And Sebastian Bach and some of the guys from Skid Row. Too Young to Die is the one song that Richie Scarlett sings. He does a pretty good job of that. They always played it live. Remember Me, which is like a fake live bluesy song. It's actually done in the studio. And Fractured 3 is pretty good. I don't know, another sequel to the Fractured Mirror. Believe it or not, Richie Scarlett was in his band from here all the way through 2018 pretty much. But this is the only one he played guitar on, which is I was mentioning before how Ace always played the rhythm guitars after this. So it's a shame that he never got to play more studio-wise with Ace, but this is a, you know, it's a really good album. They actually just re-released this on double 45 RPM vinyl, so I have yet to pick that up, but this one still sounds pretty good. And of course, number one, got to go with the '78 solo album from Kiss. What can you say? This is actually probably one of the best studio albums from Kiss under the Kiss moniker, I would think. You know, it's a strong album from top to bottom. Real heavy album, real loud. One of those albums that really pushes your speakers. Probably the Eddie Kramer production. Rip It Out. Great song, Speeding Back to My Baby. Snowblind. What's on Your Mind. New York Groove, of course, was a big hit. You know, you didn't hear about this album a lot until maybe like the later 80s. People started talking about this, how this is one of the better Kiss albums ever, I think. And it's one of those albums that got better over the years as you listen to it. So you got to rank this number one. I think Gene and Paul were surprised when he produced such a good album. And actually, you know, Ace is really the only Kiss member that has left the band and has any sort of like major output. You know, Vinnie Vincent had a couple albums. Peter Criss has had 4 albums over 4 decades. The first 2 came out within the first couple years, though. So really, none of the other guys, even Bruce Kulick, only put out a couple solo albums. So yeah, there's not a lot of output from the ex-members of Kiss, but Ace has done a lot here. So, and for all him, about everybody saying he's a goof off, you know, he seems to always get it together when he has to do an album. Just wanted to point out a couple of compilations, or this was a live EP they released in between Frehley's Comet and Second Sighting with Todd Howarth on vocals. 5 songs: Rip It Out, Breakout, Something Moved, Rocket Ride, and there's a new song on here called Words Are Not Enough, which if it was on Second Sighting probably would have been a big hit. So that's a pretty good release there. This is Loaded Deck, which is a compilation that came out in the 90s, and it's got 2 unreleased songs, 1+1 and Give It To Me Anyway, which are great songs. They should have been on one of Ace's solo albums. And then another one called 12 Picks, which has some live tracks, which ended up, I believe, on the last year's Record Store Day, Ace Frehley Live, which has 6 tracks. The funny thing about this is, like I said, this has Jamie Aldaker on drums, which is the Second Sighting tour. So the Kiss songs aren't really played that great, but it's cool to have nonetheless. It's on orange vinyl. I believe it's the same tracks that are on here. Let's see. We got Shock Me, Rip It Out. I think this has a couple more that aren't on this compilation, so it's definitely worth getting. So, there you have it. There's my ranking. Let me know what your, maybe your ranking or your top 5, especially Aaron Mutha Alamere. I know he mentioned he was thinking about doing a ranking of these 2. So if you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.